Okay, welcome. Before we get started on the material, I want to do something important here. I want to talk about a learning methodology that you can use throughout this process as you're starting to refine your knowledge of the information that's required for the exam. So let's just start with the 8 very fundamental concepts here in this learning methodology. Number 1, keep it simple. Don't try to overcomplicate this process. If you do that, it'll simply burn you out and overwhelm you. Number 2, it's wise to learn in spurts, not in long killer sessions. Try to keep those spurts to about 20 minutes maximum, and then take that 10-minute break because you want to let your brain process all of the information that you just went over. Number 3, think of it as building your house step by step, or what we call scaffolded learning. If you don't build it step by step, you're going to miss important concepts, or you're going to miss important load-bearing beams, and you're not going to build your knowledge methodically and an accelerated pace. So I always say you can't eat the whole buffet at once because you'll get sick. You can't do all your learning at once because you'll burn out, you'll get overwhelmed. Number 4, your job is to learn the concept. You need to learn it so that you can be able to talk about it and research it. That last part is super important. Research it. So when you start out in your career, you don't have to know everything. And I think that's a myth that we all come into this process with. You do not need to know everything. You simply need to know what to look up and how to research it. So if you don't know what you're looking for, it's going to be hard to know how to look it up and research it. Number 5, review your study guides at the end of each day and or at the beginning of the next day. Make it a 15-minute review session. Don't make it long and involved because your brain is already probably pretty tired. But try to do that so that you're reinforcing the information you learned before you're moving on to new information. Number 6, write down questions that are confusing to you as you're going through the learning. Write them down so that you can either research them or you can ask your instructor about. But it's really important to go through the exercise of writing down or typing out questions. Number 7, the concept that you're never behind if you're moving forward. I think it's too easy to feel like we start to fall behind and like time is evil. But keep in mind, if you're moving forward step by step, you are never behind. You're learning. And then finally, number 8, I want you to get in the practice of consulting the CompTIA exam objectives. So for instance, this lesson, we're going to be going over 2.2 in the networking section. And this, my friends, is the exam objectives. This is in your learning portal. You can download it. It's 18 pages, as you'll see over here. And you can go through these exam objectives as you're learning. And when you feel like you understand something, like this section here in 2.2, when you feel like you understand it, you can actually cross it off or check it. And that tells you what you know and what you don't know. So CompTIA tells you what they're going to test you on. Don't overcomplicate it, and then check things off as you're learning. All right, let's get started. A couple of words to know that we'll be talking about: band, frequency, channel. And I'm going from macro to micro. You'll see what I mean in just a second. When we talk about frequency bands, a band is a defined range of frequencies. The common Wi-Fi bands that we use are 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz. So again, a band is a defined range of frequencies, and the common bands that we're using for Wi-Fi are going to be 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz. Each band has a different speed or range and sometimes device compatibility. So now let me give you 2 analogies to work through. You can either use the highway and speed limit analogy, or you can use the radio analogy. I'll show you both. So if you think about each of the bands, the frequency bands, as highways, so 2.4 gigahertz is some sort of concoction of city streets, it does have a longer range or a longer reach, but there are lots of intersections. It's crowded with traffic. Picture New York City if you've either been there or watched movies that have New York City. Everything is completely packed and slow. So you're probably going to get there, but not quickly. Okay, so that's 2.4 gigahertz. 5 gigahertz is like a multi-lane highway. Maybe it's like a highway that you're familiar with in your area, I-95, 25, make up a number, but it's multi-lanes. It has faster speeds because you have more lanes or more channels to work with. Unfortunately, it is shorter. So I don't know if I can make that analogy that it's a shorter reach than the city streets analogy. Maybe play around with that. But it is faster because you have less congestion. So it's a great balance of speed and efficiency. And then finally, 6 gigahertz, think of it like the Autobahn in Germany. It is smooth, it's brand new, no traffic. You have to have really high quality equipment to use it. It is very fast. So whereas it has incredible performance, not everyone can use it. Here's the second analogy. You can think of these radio frequency ranges, the 2.4, 5, and 6. You can think of them like actual radio types of technology. So 2.4 gigahertz might be that old-timey AM, FM radio that you could turn on in your car and you could go to a couple of select channels, but it really wasn't very powerful, and it didn't have crystal clear sound. Then along comes some streaming service, maybe it's like Sirius Radio, where you have clearer channels, more stations. That's the 5 gigahertz. But then here comes this new technology. I don't even know one to use to use as in this analogy, but 6 gigahertz. It's like digital only, crystal clear, just the most powerful. So you can use those two analogies to think of. But when we get to the meat and potatoes of wireless frequencies, we're going to be talking about 2.4, 5, and 6. So let me show you what you need to know for the exam, and that's why I have it highlighted here. First, we are measuring these radio frequencies as gigahertz. When we get to the bands, when we get to the channels, we measure those as megahertz. So this 2.4 gigahertz, it does have the longest range, and I usually like to use, a body movement here because if I use my body to learn, I can remember it. Long range for 2.4 gigahertz, but very slow speed. So think of a turtle. It is also more prone to interference because you don't have a wide range of channels. In fact, some of the devices like microwaves and Bluetooth and some of the older Wi-Fi, they use 2.4. So we've got a huge congestion thing going on here. Plus, like I said, there are fewer non-overlapping channels. In fact, you only have 11 channels to work with, and you can only really use 3 of those at one time together in small spaces because you have to have 5 channels difference each time. So let's use an example here. Let's say I, along with 2 other friends, we live in a cul-de-sac together. We want to set up our wireless networks, and I know how to do it. So my other 2 friends are like, hey, listen, I'll bake you a pie if you come over and set up my wireless. So I go ahead and start off by setting up my own wireless, and I put myself on channel 1. Remember, I have to have 5 channels difference in between. I've got 2 more friends. So I've got channel 6 and channel 11 to work with. I set myself up on 1. I head over to neighbor number 1 and I set that person up on channel 6. And then I head over to neighbor number 2 and I set that person up on channel 11. That's all I can work with. Or I could do some other configuration within those 11 channels, but it's traditionally 1, 6, and 11. So again, 2.4 is great for distance, great for compatibility, but it is not great for congestion and interference. You need to know these items when it comes to 2.4. 5 gigahertz, now this is a shorter range, shorter than 2.4, but it is a faster speed. There is less interference because we have more channels available that are operating on 20 megahertz, 40 megahertz, 80 megahertz, and 160 megahertz. I have more information about that down below. But you're dealing with roughly 25 to 30 channels, which means less overlapping. So we start to see performance increase, we have cleaner connections, but unfortunately we lose our range. Now when we move to 6 gigahertz, that Autobahn in Germany, that super speedway, we see fast speeds. We have very low interference, but again, we have a shorter range. Where we get speed, we have to give up on range. And it requires newer hardware. But guess what? We get significantly more channels that are not overlapping. In fact, we get over 100 channels to play with. So this is obviously really good for high performance, modern networks. Unfortunately, devices can't really support this as well. You need newer equipment. So let's just go over wireless channels again here. I talked about 20, 40, 80, 160. If we're dealing with 2.4 gigahertz, we've got those 11 channels. So keep that in mind. 11 channels versus 25 to 30 for 5 gigahertz and over 100 for 6 gigahertz. So a channel is a smaller portion of a frequency band used for communication. So we've got the band, we've got the frequency, and now we've got the channel. Things start to get smaller here. A frequency band is the highway. It's that 2.4, that 5 gigahertz, that 6 gigahertz. Within each one of those, within 2.4, within 5, within 6, we have channels. Those are the lanes on the highway. Okay, I'm over explaining this because I'm trying to make this make sense. When we think about channels, we do have certain regulations we have to comply with. Certain channels need to be left open or reserved, restricted, because maybe those channels are used for emergency services in certain countries. So keep that in mind. It's not something that you really need to know a lot about. I'm just referencing it so that you understand what regulations mean. Why do channels even exist? So wireless devices can't all talk at once, and certainly not in the same radio space. So channels were created so that the frequency band, 2.4, 5, or 6 gigahertz, are split into smaller pieces or channels. So that means multiple devices can communicate. The signals aren't colliding as much, and performance does stay pretty stable and usable. Multiple devices, less collision, more usability. So without those channels, any use of Wi-Fi would be total chaos. So now you heard me mention 2.4. Now we've got 5 gigahertz, which has 5 and 6 gigahertz, which have their own number of channels. 5 gigahertz has 25 to 30 channels, and then 6 gigahertz has roughly 100 channels. For 5 and 6, now we're looking at measurements of 20 megahertz, 40 megahertz, 80 megahertz, and 160 megahertz. You'll just see that pattern of it doubles every time, 20 to 40, 80 to 160. All right, so a wider channel is going to be a faster speed, but we are going to see more interference. A narrower channel is going to be a slower speed, but we have more reliable connections. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Bluetooth here. So Bluetooth does function on the 2.4 gigahertz band. So it is short range wireless technology. It uses less power, and it's typically used for peripherals. So that might be, the wearables that we have. It might be keyboards, mice, headsets, speakers, a host of different devices. But when we create a personal area network, a PAN, when we create that, we can only connect 7 Bluetooth devices. You need to know these numbers. 7 Bluetooth devices at once. Distance is up to 30 feet. It is called a PAN or personal area network because you think about it, it's all around you. You got your stuff all around you because you can't go more than 30 feet. They're all consuming less power and it's operating on 2.4 gigahertz bands. Okay, so let's step back into the 802.11 Wi-Fi standards. We have some common standards. We need to know 6 of them. We need to know 802.11, and that's just the IEEE naming system. If you don't know who IEEE is, look them up, and I mean IEEE. Look them up, but they're an industry organization that designs these standards. 802.11a, b, and g, they're old time. Those are back in the day, but they're still included on the exam. A is on the 5 gigahertz only frequency. B and G are on the 2.4 gigahertz only frequency. 802.11n is a dual frequency. You can choose between 2.4 and 5. 802.11ac is 5 gigahertz only. And then the newest Wi-Fi 6 is 802.11ax. You can do 2.4, 5, or 6. Okay? I'll show you that tool that will help you understand all of this. But let's finally let's round out these other 2 technologies. So near field communication, very short range. In fact, so short that it's my phone I'm using. I'm tapping. When I go to pay, when I go to the grocery store, I tap. When I go to a department store, I tap. So I have to be within a few centimeters. It's also a low power consumption. And again, the biggest use is through contactless payments and access cards. RFID, radio frequency identification. This is using radio waves to identify objects. It is a longer range than NFC, than that little tap to pay. Depends on the type though. Some of the common uses for RFID might be employee badges, some sort of inventory tracking tool, like a little gun that you use to scan barcodes, or any other inventory tracking system. Like sometimes they'll put an RFID tag on clothing, and if you go to purchase it, if the person checking you out doesn't take that tag off, you're going to buzz as you go through the security system. And then finally, toll systems use this RFID. So I've included this little comparison summary, but something that I have found that works for me, that I really kind of hang my hat on here in terms of stories, images, and patterns. So I learn better when I look at patterns. I make up stories and I picture things. And that's not just me. That's how a lot of people learn. We learn better with that because it's just, you can visualize it. You're not trying to remember cold, hard facts. So if you look at this, this little table that I put together, I'm going to tell you a story. Bear with me. Just, stop the video when you need to, come back to me, but I want you to bear with me on this. So 802.11 is the standard. And inside of that standard, I need to know A, B, G, N, AC, AX. So in order for me to anchor myself in these letters actually move generationally. A was the first frequency that was created. AX is the most recent. Everything in between is something subsequently after the previous. So A was followed by B, B technology was followed by G, G was followed by N, N followed by AC to AX. So I sing my ABGs. Music also helps, when we try to memorize things. So I sing my ABGs, and then I skip a few letters and I go to N, and then I land in Atlantic City, AC. If you're from the East Coast, you know what Atlantic City is. If you're not from the East Coast, think of the HBO series Boardwalk Empire. That took place in Atlantic City. And then I have an axe in my hand. So I sing my ABGs, I skip a few letters to N, land in Atlantic City, and I have an axe in my hand. So if you can visualize that, then it's going to make the next 2 sections much easier. So if I look at A and AC, these 2 actually share a letter, the letter A. And so that's helping me ground myself in the fact that these 2 also only support 5 gigahertz frequencies. That's a pattern. If I look at if I go to BG, that supports 2.4 gigahertz frequencies only. So here's something goofy. If you know the band, the Bee Gees, that brother group from Australia, I'm sure you've heard their songs. Think of the Bee Gees, 2.4 gigahertz. I'm giving you a visual. N is the only frequency that supports the only standard that supports two frequencies. So N is called a dual band frequency. It supports 2.4 and 5. And then AX actually supports all three, 2.4, 5, and 6. So if you look for these patterns, A, C share a letter. Think of the Bee Gees, the band. N is the only dual band, and then AX is all three. You've got it covered. Now we move to maximum throughput. What does that mean? That means it is the top speed that any one of these standards will operate at. So if I want to stream a movie, if I want to download something, I want to have obviously a higher maximum throughput speed for uploads and downloads, but you can see the measurements here. So I usually like to start in Atlantic City when I think about this. I think about 1300 megabits per second, 1300. Okay, my favorite number happens to be 13, but there's also a franchise out there. I'm going to show you a couple pictures here. If you recognize this person from the franchise, the movies, that would be Jason from Friday the 13th. So if you think about 1300 megabits per second, I am running down, this is AC, remember this is AC. I am running down a boardwalk right here. This is Atlantic City. I'm running down the boardwalk and Jason is behind me, chasing me, and he's got that machete in his hand. So 1300, Friday the 13th, I'm in Atlantic City, running down the boardwalk, Jason's chasing me. If I were to divide 1300 in half, I would get roughly 600, but let's just round down to make this easier. 1300 is 650, but let's say 600. And then finally for A, B, and G, I just make a sandwich, top bun, meat patty, bottom bun, or veggie patty if you don't eat meat. Here's a sorry looking sandwich. It does not include any condiments, but we've got the top bun, the meat, and the bottom bun. So that would be 54 megabits per second, 11 megabits per second, 54. Those 54s are the buns. All right. Let us go back to Atlantic City. As the technology started to progress, that made 1300 megabits per second a higher throughput. So they got better with AC. They started developing, better equipment. So now instead of 1300 megabits per second, it's 6.9 gigabits per second. Now, conversion here, let me just show you something. 1300 megabits per second, if I were to convert that to gigabits, it would be 1.3 gigabits per second. So just want to show you that clear difference, or that the conversion in there, so that you can see that 6.9 gigabits is definitely faster than 1300 megabits per second or 1.3 gigs. It's significantly faster, but you can see how that conversion works. So 6.9. Now remember, I still have AX. So yes, I was in Atlantic City. Yes, I was being chased by Jason from Friday the 13th, but maybe I have an axe in my hand and I turn around and I just start axing. We're dueling it out. He with his machete, me with my axe. That's what I think about to remember axe as being the final one. It is triple band, tri-band. And then if you were to flip-flop 6.9 to 9.6, you've got a pattern there. Just flip-flop 6.9 to 9.6. And again, these are maximum throughputs. So that means it's been tested over and over and over, and they took the average, and that's considered the maximum throughput. I do hope this helps, but pretty much we've gone over everything here in 2.2. I've given you a way to memorize the wireless standards. If you don't want to use a story, a pattern, or an image, just go through each day, and for the whole day, repeat to yourself 802.11a, 5 gigahertz, 54 megabits per second. If you want to go the more simplified route, you can do that. But I showed you all of that information I showed you where it is in the exam objectives, and also I'm going to give you this study guide. Again, remember, as you're doing your studying, try and stay within this methodology. Try to incorporate review. It's going to help you remember these things so that you have faster recall on the exam. All right, I hope this helps everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.